Remember when Oda casually gave us a science lecture about Pyrobloin? If you answered yes, you're lying to yourself. If you answered no, that's totally fair. I barely remembered. But here's the thing. Pyrobloin might be far more important than we ever realized beyond just being the secret ingredient to Sky Island. It could actually be tied to the origin of life itself in the One Piece world. Pyrobloin. That's a word that's only been brought up once on the exact release date of July 29th, 2002. What the hell was I doing in 2002?
I gotta sing the Doom song now!
When you think about it, Pyrobloin is responsible for one of One Piece's most critical world-building components, Sky Island. I mean, that much we know, but when you dig a little deeper, you start to see that Pyrobloin could be just one of those little details that Oda sneaked into the story 20-something years ago, only to be relevant in the year 3050 in a huge, earth-shadowing way that completely tears the space-time fabric of One Piece as we know it. Like being tied to life itself. Assumedly. But seriously, what the fuck is up with Pyrobloin? Huh? That's why today, we're gonna break that down. We'll start by explaining what Pyrobloin is in its hidden nature, such as how it may be connected to Haki. And by the end of the video, I'll show you how Pyrobloin could be the key to understanding the origin of many of the races we've seen in One Piece, like giants, fishmen, whatever the hell this thing is. So if you ever question at a certain point how fish grew legs and facial hair and developed the conscious decision to open up a dojo to practice the art of karate, like the video, subscribe, and click the notification bell so I can answer that oddly specific fish-related question you asked. Not me, you. Let's get into it. Before we dive into the details, let's take a moment to lay down some groundwork about Pyrobloin. You've probably heard this word tossed around like once in the Skypiea Arc. Well, it turns out that Pyrobloin might be way more important than we ever gave it credit for. But before we connect all the dots, we need to get one thing straight. What even is Pyrobloin? In One Piece chapter 240, Pagaya describes it as particles of keratin. Yeah, keratin, the same protein found in hair, nails, and animal horns. Now, if you're already confused at this point, wondering when Oda ever mentioned the term keratin, you've probably only watched the anime adaptation of chapter 240, episode 154, where instead of Pagaya describing it as particles of keratin, he uses the term corneous particles instead. Both the manga and the anime are essentially saying the same thing. So, why do I think Oda wants us to pay attention to keratin? We'll get there soon, but for now, let's talk about where it comes from. In the One Piece world, volcanoes. Pyrobloin is shot up into the sky from volcanic eruptions in the Blue Sea, and Pagaya explains how Pyrobloin particles are so dense that when they're shot up into the atmosphere, they absorb moisture and create sea clouds and island clouds, the very stuff that makes Sky Islands possible. Pyrobloin is the backbone of the entire Skypiea ecosystem. But here's the thing, Pagaya also mentions that Pyrobloin is a primary component of sea stone, and that opens up a whole new can of worms. So think about it. If Pyrobloin is found in sea stone, the substance that suppresses devil fruit powers, then we're not just talking about fluffy clouds in the sky anymore. We're talking about a natural element that hugely impacts the One Piece world's balance of power. So, all of that sounds interesting and cool. But why the hell are keratin particles erupting from volcanoes in the first place? Like, that's not a normal volcano behavior, right? I mean, keratin is a biological substance found in living things, so why is it shooting out of the earth in volcanic eruptions? We don't have a definitive answer to that, at least in the context of the One Piece world, and I'm not going to pretend I do, but I will say this, it's fucking weird. And when it comes to Oda, when something seems weird, it's usually hiding a much deeper truth. It raises a big question. Why is Pyrobloin, a substance tied to life itself, coming from the core of the earth, or whatever the One Piece world is called? And this isn't just a small detail Oda threw in randomly. This detail has been sitting there quietly for over 2 decades, and it starts to paint a bigger picture about how the natural world and living creatures are intertwined in One Piece's lore and world building. But we're not done yet, because if we're talking about Pyrobloin being connected to life, we might as well tie it to Haki. Okay, so now we know what Pyrobloin is, and we've got a pretty good solid grasp on its mechanics and how it essentially is organic matter. But we need to address the big question. Could Pyrobloin contain traces of Haki? According to Rayleigh, every living thing in the world of One Piece has a spiritual force. hockey. So, if Pyrobloin is a natural substance connected to life and energy, could it somehow retain fragments of the spiritual energy of those who came before? Now, here's where things really get interesting. We recently learned from Vegapunk that the One Piece world used to have a different structure, with far more land masses and less ocean way before the Void Century. And during this period, something caused sea levels to rise and wipe out continents, similar to what we saw with the impact of Emu using the so-called ancient weapon that utilizes the Mother Flame to erase Lelucia Kingdom, causing sea levels to rise. This means many people died during the Void Century, and I mean a lot of people died in the Void Century if this happened for real. So what does this have to do with Pyrobloin? Well, if Pyrobloin is being shot up of volcanic eruptions in the Blue Sea, especially from underwater volcanoes, it could be carrying remnants of those ancient people, their bodies, their souls, their haki. Think about it. If haki is an inherent spiritual energy present in all living beings, and if Pyrobloin contains traces of the original inhabitants of the world, then it stands to reason that small traces of haki could be embedded in Pyrobloin itself. And this isn't even without precedent. We've seen that certain natural materials in the One Piece world can interact with haki, like sea stone for instance. Sea stone contains Pyrobloin. So, what if the reason sea stone nullifies devil fruits is that it's imbued with traces of haki, a natural energy that restores balance to the unnatural powers granted by devil fruits? We even have examples of objects like Odin's swords possessing haki traces. The concept of tying haki into knots is also a recent addition to the story. So where does that leave us? If Pyrobloin is essentially a conduit for haki and spews out of volcanoes into the sky, why not everywhere else that's not in the sky? This would fundamentally change how we think about haki and its impact on the fabric of the One Piece world, and haki could be present in the current natural world itself. Not only that, but this connection between Pyrobloin and haki might actually have bigger implications for the origin of diverse races within the One Piece world. Southbirds. Remember these little fucks? They're relevant. The size difference between the Southbirds on Jaya and the ones on Upper Yard is really noticeable. On Jaya, the Southbirds are, pretty standard sized birds. But when we get to Upper Yard, the same species of bird, they're thick.
Damn, boy, he's thick!
So, what's going on here? Did the Southbirds just evolve to be bigger because they live in the sky, or is there something more at play? According to the One Piece Wiki, the decrease in atmosphere in Skypiea explains why the trees and animals on Upper Yard have grown to huge sizes. I couldn't really find any references or citations in the wiki to confirm this, so take this with a grain of salt, but scientifically, it sounds smart to me. In real life, the pressure in the air around us can affect how big living creatures grow. When animals live at higher places like mountains, where the air is thinner and has less oxygen, they often become larger over time. And this happens because with less oxygen available, their bodies adapt by growing bigger so they can take in more oxygen, which would be something an expert would say, but regardless of whether the climate or weather contributes to the giantification of these birds, I'm willing to bet that because Pyrobloin is such a relevant element in Skypiea's environmental structure, it's literally all over the place, it contributes to the hugeness of the plants and animals on Upper Yard. So why is this important for understanding the unique and diverse races in the One Piece world? And how do Pyrobloin and haki help us solve this mystery? Earlier we discussed how Pyrobloin is made of organic material, keratin particles, which naturally come from living things. We also know that every living thing has a spiritual energy, haki, and given the significant amount of Pyrobloin released into the air, it's reasonable to think that a lot of it has landed on Upper Yard, and as a result, it's become part of the environment, especially with the changes caused by the knock-up stream that sent Upper Yard soaring into the sky. This has affected everything from the quality of the soil to the essential nutrients that animals and plants need to survive. This leads me to the following idea. What if the animals and plants in Upper Yard absorbed the Pyrobloin in its soil, leading to an evolutionary reaction? Think about it. Haki allows individuals to adapt to the world around them by manifesting their willpower into tangible abilities. It's not just a power system, it reflects mankind's desire to survive and live freely, even when faced with impossible odds. So take observation haki for example, the ability to sense the presence of others, feel their emotions, or even predict their movements. It's like a heightened survival instinct, an evolutionary adaptation that allows people to react faster and avoid danger. It's the perfect way to sense predators or threats. The more dangerous the world is, the more necessary it becomes to develop a way to stay one step ahead of danger. Armored Haki lets you harden your body or weapons, making invisible armor for protection, or beating the shit out of people really good. This ability can be viewed as a response to the harsh environment of the One Piece world, where you must defend yourself without depending on outside weapons or armor. And lastly, Conqueror's Haki imposes one's will on those with weaker spirited resolve. It's practically the ultimate expression of freedom, representing the will to shape your fate, bending the world to your desires instead of being constrained by it. In One Piece, Haki functions similarly to Darwin's idea of evolution, which is often summarized as survival of the fittest. However, in this context, it's more about the survival of the most strong-willed. Those who push their determination to the limit and refuse to give up their freedom are the ones who can evolve and adapt through Haki. Essentially, Haki represents a form of natural selection in the One Piece world. The stronger your will is, the better you can handle the difficulties that arise. Conversely, if your will is weak, you're more likely to be overwhelmed by the tough circumstances around you. Now, let's apply that to Upper Yard. Plants and animals already struggling to adapt to a harsh new environment suddenly find themselves exposed to Pyrobloin-infused soil that contains traces of Haki. Over time, as these creatures absorb nutrients from the soil, the Haki within the keratin particles respond to their willpower to survive. So when these animals are suddenly thrown into a new environment with Pyrobloin particles floating around, it's possible that the Pyrobloin reacted to their survival instincts, causing them to grow bigger to match their will to survive. Now let's expand this idea to other non-human races. So imagine that Pyrobloin spread across various parts of the world, especially to regions with extreme environment, where people's survival instincts were pushed to the limit. Over time, the Haki traces in the Pyrobloin-infused environment could have responded to the willpower of those people, causing them to evolve into entirely new races. Think about giants, for example. From what we could tell, regular humans would find it very difficult to live in the environment of Elbaf. Thankfully, the Straw Hats aren't regular humans. Usopp and Nami, that's arguable. It is home to massive creatures and experiences harsh snowstorms and other types of weather, I assume, and it's also famous for its frequent wars. The giant ancestors developed ways to survive in these extreme, mountainous, and unpredictable weather conditions, which probably helped them grow in size and strength over many generations due to their willpower to survive, triggering Pyrobloin exposure in their bodies and thus changing their lineage factor. Fishmen and merfolk may have developed from human ancestors who lived in areas with plenty of water, where their survival was at risk due to the environment. The presence of Pyrobloin in the soil and water enhanced their lineage factor with Haki elements, leading to their gradual evolution into fish people shaped by their survival instincts. The ancestors of the Long Leg tribe likely hailed from high-altitude locations where survival depended on mastering the art of using tangent stilts. I mean, who want legs so long that you could practically hop over mountains and cover long distances? But at some point, they're probably thinking, we're tired of the stilts bullshit. We wish we had longer legs. Their instinct to survive and reach higher places, along with the Haki traces found in their environment through Pyrobloin, likely led to an evolutionary change that resulted in longer, stronger legs, thus embodying their desire for the freedom to reach higher and farther places. Imagine if the dwarves from the Tatara tribe originally started out as insects, and their environment, enriched by Pyrobloin, reacted to their determination and need to survive. Over time, this interaction could have led them to evolve into intelligent humanoid beings, and this idea explains their size, natural strength, deep connection to nature, and ability to fall for every gaslighting trick in the book. I could go on and on about every race, but it would take forever, which is time I do not have, nor do you. Despite all of us being invested into an over 2-decade-long series, let's be real, we kind of do have all the time in the world in that respect, just for One Piece though. So if Pyrobloin really does influence evolution and survival instincts, it makes you wonder, what happens when someone is exposed to it before they're even born? There's a particular Yonko who stands out to me in that regard. Their physical state and their relentless appetite seem unusually intense. Their hunger is so strong that it feels almost like an inherited instinct ingrained in their essence, and maybe, just maybe, that hunger wasn't born out of greed, but necessity. But that's a theory for another day. In the meantime, you can capture all my theories in this playlist right here.